we're now joined by Thapelo Mohapi. He is the General Secretary of Abahlali baseMjondolo movement, and he joins us via our phone line. Thapelo, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition on SABC News. Perhaps let's start off with just getting your sentiments when it comes to the crisis that has hit to the city of Johannesburg when it comes to those 77 people who perished in a fire in Johannesburg.
Good evening to the viewers. Yes, this has actually shown that when you are poor, if you are not left out when it comes to the development that is taking place in the country, you are left to die in the manner that the people have died. And these are black people who are from the working class, who are poor, who come to the cities for better opportunities, because there's poverty in the rural areas, there's poverty in some of the countries where others are coming as migrant workers into Johannesburg. So this shows a deep crisis, not only to the hijacked buildings, but also the deep crisis that we are having as far as inner city accommodations for the poorest of the poor in this country.
And, recently we've seen, some officials in the city of Johannesburg as well. Now today, we saw some in KwaZulu-Natal, in Durban, going around looking at derelict buildings and trying to reclaim those buildings because they're trying to avoid another tragedy from taking place. What are your thoughts when it comes to these officials, both in the city of Johannesburg and now in KZN and in Durban, now inspecting these buildings?
It is unfortunate that government deals with problems after a crisis. We have to wait for crisis to take place before government acts. We are not proactive as a country. But at the same time, I'm afraid that now they are not going to follow the law in terms of evicting people. And there's always been this blame game around the human rights organizations and human rights lawyers who have been protecting people from being unlawfully evicted and thrown out of the streets, because Section 26 of the Constitution in this country says no one should be evicted without providing alternative accommodation. And that's what the city of Johannesburg has been wanting to do. And the human rights organizations and the human rights lawyers have been trying to prevent an unlawful evictions from taking place. Provide alternative accommodations for those that are living in these buildings, fix the buildings, and provide affordable housing in the inner city for the poorest of the poor who have come to work in the city to seek better opportunities. Or else government should provide and invest more in the rural areas where we come from, because we would not come to the cities if our towns and places where we come from, there are universities, there are firms where people can find work, where people can make a living in the areas where we are. We are coming to the cities. Urbanization takes place as a result of poverty and hunger and frustration that is happening in the rural areas where we come from.
And, with the inspections being done, Thapelo, what does it say about the housing crisis in our city centers?
Well, we have a deep crisis in as far as that, and I don't think the government of that day, we'll be celebrating 30 years since our freedom, democracy next year. Yet you have cities like Durban who have more than 200,000 backlog in terms of houses. You have 300,000 in Johannesburg and more than 200,000 in Cape Town. So it shows that when black people who were denied access to land, who were denied access to move into the cities to seek better opportunities during apartheid, and now they are denied access to the cities because the cities have become even more expensive. As a result, our people in the informal settlement resort into congested and unhuman conditions, even in the buildings where people move in and are robbed by the people who hijack the flats and rents. And they are squashing in the manner that they are because they are at least going to pay this individual who will not charge as much as the private developers will do. As a result, a crisis happens and we only discover that a building has been hijacked, that there are individuals who are making others pay, that there are individuals who are actually congesting people to live under these inhuman conditions. So we have a deep crisis in as far as that, and we are calling on government to deal with the issue of providing accommodation affordable for the working class in the inner cities, whether it's in Cape Town, Durban, or Johannesburg.
And one would say, Thapelo, that this is not the first time where there is some sort of focus when it comes to hijacked buildings in the city centres. And now that, we have seen, unfortunately, the deaths of at least 77 people, do you think that government is willing to try and resolve this crisis? Because most of these buildings are actually owned by government.
Yes, and in fact, to go further, some of the people who are allowing these buildings to be hijacked are city officials. These are people who are working for the municipalities who make way for people to actually have these buildings renting out to some people. So we are urging government to investigate further, because there are politicians who are involved in these hijacked buildings. We know very well in KwaZulu-Natal that there are politicians who are involved in shack farming, who are making people to rent in the informal settlements. So we are saying that government must do everything in its power in order for us to deal with the issue and the crisis of housing in this country, because there are those who want informal settlement to exist for their own benefit, because they are gaining profit out of it, and therefore they wanted to maintain it that way. And these are people with authority, who are politicians, who have influence, and those people must be exposed and be arrested, because it is unfair for politicians to make a living out of people's poverty.